Hi everyone, welcome to our webinar, How to Efficiently and Effectively Support a Remote Workforce. Thank you very much for joining us. We're really excited to be having a conversation with everyone today around a really interesting, popular and topical subject. We've seen a gradual rise in remote working over the years, but now it's exploded and organizations are struggling to keep staff who now work from home informed, engaged, and productive. We hope today's webinar will be insightful, useful, and give you practical tips on how you can support your remote workforce. Whether this is something you've been doing for a while, or it's something that's brand new you've only been doing for a couple of days or a couple of weeks. My name is Josh Anstey. I'm the Customer Solutions Director at Elcom. I've been with Elcom over 10 years now, and I've had the opportunity and privilege to work with organizations across all industries, helping deliver personalized internet and digital workplace solutions that help support and manage their remote workforce, ensuring staff have access to information, tools, knowledge, people, team workspaces, and online forms. And this helps keep their teams happy, productive, and engaged. And it's something that gets me really excited. Love the opportunity of doing that. And hopefully today we can share some of those tips and ideas that we've learned and experienced over many years. Just a little bit of formalities and housekeeping. On the right-hand side is the GoToWebinar panel. During the webinar, if you have any questions, please jump in and type them into the question box. At the end, we're going to do our best to answer as many questions as possible. And if we don't get a chance to answer them all in the allocated time, we will definitely be getting back to you individually afterwards. So please feel free to ask questions as we're going through the different areas of the agenda and the topics. And at the end, we'll try and answer as many as possible. We have a really exciting and jam-packed agenda for today's webinar, and there's 4 key areas we'll be discussing or focusing on. So the first is the 3 pillars of effective remote working. We'll then look at the key areas you must not overlook when setting up your digital workplace. Once we've had a look at those 2 topics, we will then cover the features and functionality to support your remote workforce immediately. And what are some of the quick wins you can get? What are some of the things you can do today, tomorrow, this week, and next week to actually help support that remote workforce? And then we'll look at the long-term considerations for supporting your remote workforce. So if it is something that's going to be a long-term plan for your team, for your department, for your organization as a whole, what are some of the long-term considerations that you can maybe start thinking about now so you can plan in advance? So what are the 3 pillars of effective remote working? So there's a lot to consider over here, and we've decided that it sort of makes sense to look at it in 3 key areas. The first is around productivity. And, really productivity is a no-brainer. And if staff don't have access to resources, tools, and colleagues to perform their jobs, then productivity is going to suffer. And, it must be really easy for them to access the latest information, accurate version of content or documents or news or any type of information and knowledge, and they should be able to do that anytime on any device. The next key pillar is around communication. Staff need transparent, timely, consistent, and personalized communication for everything, from customer information to product information and services information, and just general organization information and knowledge and news. That might be updates about what might be going on in the organization. It might be access to updated policies and procedures. So communication is really important, making sure that everyone has access to the right information and it can be communicated effectively, and it is, of course, relevant. And the third key pillar there is engagement. And it's really about building a positive culture by keeping staff emotionally and mentally connected. And that's something that needs to be a short-term priority to solve today, tomorrow, this week, and next week, but also something to think about from a long-term perspective as well. How do you keep your teams engaged, motivated, and productive in their remote working environment, especially if this is something that's very new for them? So let's discuss a few of the challenges around these key pillars. The first we'll talk about and look at is productivity. So maybe there's a challenge where there's no access at home or on the road to certain information and content and the tools they need to do their job as best as possible. Maybe they can't access the network drives outside the office, or they can access them, but it won't work on a mobile or a tablet device. They've got to be in front of a laptop or a desktop or a computer or something like that. Another big challenge we hear around productivity is there's no central resource. And so information is scattered across everything from personal drives, shared drives, instant messaging apps, email threads, and probably too much in email, as we all know, paper trails, and a whole range of other systems. Maybe they're cloud systems, maybe they're local systems, but it's very, very inconsistent, and that leads to a lot of duplicated content, information, duplicated policies and outdated policies, and obviously a big problem where your teams don't know what is the right information to be communicating to their clients that they're working with. And inefficient processes is another really big one where your teams end up having to jump through too many hoops to get basic tasks done. And so if you think about what might happen in the office where you quickly walk over to someone to have a quick chat or conversation, or quickly scream out to someone to ask them for some information, and they tell you where that is, sometimes everything becomes quite inefficient because there's no central digital workplace or repository to be able to access the information they need or ask those questions where the team can actually answer for them. This is an interesting statistic over here from a report that really focuses on this topic. And it says most staff toggle between up to 10 apps 10 times an hour. And that actually equates, if you extrapolate that, to 30 days of lost workplace productivity. So that's a lot of time that's lost over there just by toggling between different apps and having disconnected productivity solutions and tools. Effective communication is obviously really, really challenging. It's hard enough when you're in the same office together or the same meeting room together, and that gets exacerbated and becomes a bigger problem when there's a large remote workforce. And some of those challenges around communication is a lot of inconsistent communication. So communications can be confusing, and they may change between different channels and tools you're using and between different people. Sometimes it's irrelevant. So you're just getting too many emails and too many updates and too much information, and it's not relevant to you based on your team, your department, maybe your location, the city, state, office, country you might be in. And the other big challenge around communication is that it's not transparent. And so often when everyone's working remotely, people have no idea what's actually going on in the organization outside their immediate role, their immediate team or department. And so there's just no transparency around what the overall organization is actually doing. This is a very timely report over here, the State of Remote Report 2020, and really looking at some of the statistics and data over here. The question, what's your biggest struggle with working remotely? And I'm not going to go through them all, but if you have a look at the first one, collaboration and communication, which is exactly what we've been talking about and one of the key pillars that we're looking at. And the second one over there is loneliness. I think that's really important to look at because that really ties into everything else around productivity, around efficiency, around communication, around engagement, around collaboration. And they really go hand in hand. If you're not doing the one in driving better productivity, better communication, better engagement, better collaboration, you're going to end up with people and teams feeling rather lonely. So they really are, an effect of each other. So, when we look at that, close to pretty much 40% is really focused around the same issue, that collaboration, communication, and loneliness. And so if you can solve that, 40% of it can be solved quite quickly and quite easily. Because everyone's working remotely, gone are those informal chats and get-togethers with each other or teams or departments, where they're quickly chatting over the water cooler in the kitchen or walk into different meeting rooms. And so this idea of prolonged social isolation is a real and concerning issue among staff, teams, departments, and especially for those that aren't used to working remotely. It's a complete brand new world for them. And so engagement is really, really an important area that you should be focusing on. What ends up happening is if you don't focus on it, people are going to start to feel disconnected, they're going to be disengaged, and they're going to be demotivated, and that's obviously going to have ripple effects throughout the organization. I thought this was a great little cartoon over here. We've got someone over there at the water cooler. Hey, Doug, try and guess the, oh, wait, I'm alone. And then you can see them standing over there at the water cooler, having a bit of water by themselves and, starting to cry in the third little character over there. So, I think that really epitomizes what we're talking about over here, that if you kind of have that quick conversation with everyone, you start to lose engagement and people are going to be feeling really disconnected. So let's look at setting up your digital workplace and key areas not to overlook when you're setting up your digital workplace. There's a lot of information and content over here, and hopefully you'll find it useful that you can start thinking about it and actioning it right away. So the first is around requirements gathering. Start with your people, with your teams, and talk to people across a whole range of departments, locations, and different areas of the organization to understand what do they want, what do they need, how are you going to make life a lot easier for them. Find out what tools and resources are needed for new processes or to update historical processes you've had to factor in having a lot more remote employees and remote teams working. And also determine escalation points of contact for each tool, solution, system, and process in case your team have issues. And I think that third one's a really important one. Often if you're in the office and sitting across from someone, you can quickly shout out to them and get something resolved or escalate it. If everyone's remote working from home, it's a lot harder to do that. So it's really important to have a bit of a process in place there so that everyone understands how and when do and can I escalate that. Also put in place a strategy. So address things like, priorities and needs and wants of your team. And there's going to be a lot of needs and wants you're going to be hearing about. So it's really important from the management and executive level to hear that all, to listen to it all and take that all on board and work out what makes the most sense. You can't tackle everything on day one. So it's really important to then prioritize and work out how do you address those needs and wants and how do you prioritize them. It's also really important to address everything from the security, legal, and regulatory challenges, and that may change between different industries, but it is really important to think about that early on, and so you've got clear policies in place and clear communication across the organization. And then address the gap between what's needed and what's available. You may not have the tools in place straight away or have the ability to procure them, purchase them, think about them, decide on them, so put a plan in place to actually address the gap and then work out the plan to eventually solve that over a period of time. The third item over there is personalization. So think about how large your workforce is and if it is worth personalizing everything. And if it is, then look at how you can personalize. And that's personalizing everything from the news they see, the policies, the procedures, the forms and workflows, the communication, the team workspaces and collaboration. So think about who they are, what information they need to access, how much information there will be, and whether it makes sense to personalize it. On a personal note or perspective, and I guess from an Elcom side of things, we definitely think it makes sense to personalize as much as possible because it's going to make everyone a lot more engaged, turn your digital workplace into a much more of a sticky environment and place to go to, and it's going to make everyone a lot happier. So there's definitely a need to personalize, but you still need to get that organization-wide information out to everybody. So definitely don't neglect that or do not make sure that they can't access that company-wide update. Authentication and identity management are also really, really important. So think about how you're managing your staff identities. Is it through one system, maybe through Active Directory? And can you authenticate them from different locations? Or are you managing different usernames and passwords and details in lots of other systems? So definitely think about trying to consolidate that, trying to have a central way of actually managing who the users are in the organization. Things like setting up security groups and permission groups that you've got peace of mind knowing who can and can't access different solutions, different information, different content. Even when you're thinking about your intranet and digital workplace, think about who should be seeing which content on the internet, what's on the homepage, what's in different sub-pages and different folders and areas of the internet as well. And also look at single sign-on. So if you do an identity management system in place, or you're thinking about it, think about how you can single sign-on users between different systems. So if they are logging into the intranet and they have single sign-on, are they going to click off to another system that they might need to use, a business system they're using? And is there going to be single sign-on for that as well to make their life a lot easier so that they don't have to remember lots of different passwords and worry about trying to go through the whole forgotten password, resetting passwords. And that's a real big roadblock to productivity and efficiency and that communication and collaboration. It's also really important when you think about the team and obviously bringing new people on board or people leaving the organization and moving on, that you can effectively activate or deactivate user login and access to different systems they might be using. Aligning expectations is really important, especially when you're looking at digital workplaces and a lot of organizations who have obviously moved to remote working. So think about different staff and their roles and align the expectations of their roles and obviously of the teams they're in and the organization, and they all build up to each other. But you sometimes may need to create new structures and processes. You may potentially need additional meetings or maybe a stand-up or a morning briefing or an afternoon stand-up or afternoon update or something like that, a daily wrap-up, just to keep everyone on the same page, to keep the expectations happening, and also to be engaging with everyone. I think that's really, really effective, having that morning stand-up and afternoon stand-up just to say hello, the ability to talk to everybody, see each other, and feel part of that collective team, even though everyone is working remotely. So that's something to think about when you've got a team that's moving into a remote workforce environment. And also the expectations in terms of their role, their job. Maybe it's changed since they've become a remote working team member, or maybe it's the same, but there's different ways to actually communicate how different projects are going. So really, really important to be able to set the expectations in terms of their roles, the teams in the organization. And also check back regularly. So it's definitely not something where when you're setting up that digital workplace, you're putting a process in place, a procedure in place, and it's set up and that's it. Definitely check back regularly and look at, in a week's time, how things have been going. In a month's time, has it improved? Do you need to make some updates or changes? And have quarterly check-ins. And those are definitely not just from the management perspective. You're going to want to collect feedback from everyone in the organization. Possibly you might do anonymous surveys on the internet, which is a great way. You might want to have one-on-one meetings and calls with people to get some feedback. Obviously, one-on-one meetings can take quite a bit more time, but you'll get some fantastic information and feedback. At the same time, anonymous surveys that you run on the internet are also great ways for people to tell you how they're truly and honestly feeling about remote working, what's working for them and what's not working for them. And then as you move forward, and this might become something that your organization is doing, not just in the short term, but in the medium to long term, you're going to be able to use this amazing feedback and this data to actually improve and introduce new processes and tools. And again, when you're thinking about looking at that gap analysis of what people want, what do they need, it's really going to help you understand what should we be putting in place, what should we be improving, what did we think was doing a great job, but it's clearly not doing a great job, and we can improve from that perspective. So let's now look at how you can support the immediate needs of your remote workforce. And as we mentioned at the beginning, there's a lot of organizations who have suddenly started working remotely in the last few days and last few weeks. And those organizations might have finished scrambling to get home, I guess, and start working remotely or working from home. And now it's about actually supporting it on a day-to-day basis and moving forward. And so we want to look at some great tips and tricks and features and functionality and solutions to actually solve that. So the first is around a centralized hub. So think about creating a single source of truth, that intranet, digital workplace, that's that central hub where everyone goes on a day-to-day basis, where they live and breathe the organization. And it's really important to maintain one accurate and up-to-date version of information so that policies and procedures are in one location. Nobody likes it when you've got 3 or 4 different places to go to access different policies. All the same policy is in 2 or 3 locations, and you don't actually know which is the correct one or the most up-to-date one. You also want to direct all your internal communications to this hub for information. So if you're posting those updates on your intranet and your digital workplace, you'll build the culture, you'll train everyone that that's actually the place to go to get the latest information on whatever might be going on right now, whether they're announcements, they're alerts, they're any type of information. It's also going to remove that confusion of wondering, is that something that gets emailed or that gets posted on the intranet, or we get a phone call about that, or we get updated in a meeting? So if you do create that centralized hub, it's going to make it a lot easier to direct everyone and let them know that internal communications, internal comms are all updated directly through the hub. And also look at splitting it by different ways your organization might be able to be split. So teams, products, services, topics, and any other relevant section. So when they jump into their centralized hub, their intranet digital workplace, they can easily access the information that's relevant to them and personalized to that specific user. Integration is another really important one. So when we look at integration and linking off to other systems, often staff are using multiple systems in their digital ecosystem, and you want to make that process really smooth, really easy for everybody. So start with quick links to other systems from that central interface from the intranet and digital workplace. If you can incorporate single sign-on and direct users to those other systems where they don't have to re-log in, that's obviously fantastic. Not every system supports that. We're happy to have a conversation with you and look at how Elcom supports single sign-on and make life easier for users. And integrate it with other solutions such as your identity management provider, maybe your enterprise social network, document management system, your CRM, or whatever else it might be, just to make life a lot easier for your team members. Top-down communication is really, really interesting. And really the best advice there is communicate early and communicate often. And so that might be everything from publishing organization-wide news items, articles, blogs, and whether you're publishing those daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, publish them frequently so everyone's up to date, they know what's going on. Target specific audiences based on department, role, or location. And yes, everyone is working remotely, but you can think about it location based on different offices, different states or regions or territories. So provide them information that is relevant. Think about how you'd make their life a lot easier if they were inside the office, and think about doing the exact same thing. You may also want to pull in news feeds from third-party sources, and that's not necessarily just general news, but you might have industry-specific news or trade news sites that your team would typically go to, and it's great to pull in an RSS feed of those third-party sources and provide them with that central hub, that one location to access all the information they need. You may also want to add alerts in for prominent locations around the intranet, for example, so that they can quickly see any big announcement you need to get to them. And if there are policies, procedures, or alerts you need people to read or understand or accept, think about those read receipts or the ability to check something and confirm you've actually read that and you understand the new policy. A corporate directory is also really, really useful, especially with everyone working remotely. And think about integrating your identity management provider to actually remove that manual maintenance of looking after the corporate directory or the staff directory. It's hard to find the who's who in the zoo if you're not sitting in the same office or you're working remotely. So a corporate directory is going to save a lot of time and a lot of effort. And you can also think about adding partial organization charts. So it might not be the whole organization, but it might just be a team and department. Maybe the people and culture team, or you've got a crisis management team, or the HR team, or the IT team. So think about setting that up and displaying that to users. You can also link to things like their social profiles, their profile picture, contact details, areas of expertise, location, whatever it might be. And I think something that's really important is make it searchable. Make sure you don't have to browse through tens or hundreds or thousands of people to find the right people. Social messaging is also a really key area, and building that collaboration as part of your intranet and your digital workplace. So think about creating social streams around topics. Now, they may be teams, departments, projects you're working on. They might be around customers, or it could just be social. So sometimes you can use this to recreate that water cooler discussion or recreate that conversation in the kitchen. And so it's a great way to have a little social area to be posting updates. It doesn't always have to be specifically about a project or very corporate. It's nice to have that social engagement. It'll also enable people to provide feedback and immediate input. So they might be able to comment or ask questions, even give kudos or a high five or like something to a social post, and use the app mentions to tag others so that people get notified when they've been mentioned in a thread. And I think it's also really important to give context to those social streams. So setting up social collaboration areas and team workspaces, it's really important to give some context and let everyone know this one's related to a project we're working on. This one's about a product launch. This one's about policies and procedures. This one's a social one. You can just post some updates and news and, the water cooler discussion. So it's really important to give context to those different team workspaces you're setting up. And enabling users to subscribe to those updates as well is really, really important. Let's now look at how you can support the long-term needs of your remote workforce. And what does that look like when this becomes something that's not just for today, but is, in the medium to long term, something that you're going to be planning for and getting used to. So start thinking about how you can automate manual processes and drive productivity across the organization. And you can help remote staff by actually reducing those inefficient processes. So think about what's typically a lot of conversation or a lot of maybe email or a lot of paper, and digitize those paper-based forms. And that's really easy with a drag and drop form creator, where you can set up things like different panels and categorize fields. You can set up things like digital signatures and actually personalize it and pre-populate the fields, which makes sure that the actual data is a lot more accurate. Also think about adding workflow for approval. So there's actually that audit trail. It can go through a workflow approval process, and users can obviously track where that is. And obviously it's important to display it in contextually relevant areas. So if the forms around HR policies, maybe annual leave or expense forms, it's in the right place, whereas if it's an IT ticket or request, that's in the appropriate place as well. Enterprise search is really important. It always has been, but with remote workforces and everyone working remotely or working from home, finding the information you need in the organization is number one now. It's really vital. So it's really important to have search where you can search content and information on the intranet. It might be searching for people, and maybe it's a name or it's a role or it's a team, or searching for team workspaces and collaboration areas as well. So it's really important to make sure that your search will search not just the content on the site, it'll be searching the documents, the text inside of the documents, the team workspaces, the people, and it's really going to be an all-in-one search for the organization. And then you can use things like best bets, where you might want to promote certain search responses or certain search results for different users based on the term that they're actually typing in or what the search keyword actually is. And the final point to mention there is around something like federated search, where you could actually point the search to external content repositories and bring those search results in. We mentioned transparency earlier, but I think as this becomes a lot more of a long-term world of working remotely and work from home, you need to have that commitment to consistent communication and transparency. So set those clear expectations for staff to communicate and to regularly check in, as we spoke about. Your managers also need to be accountable for their teams, for the people working with them, for publishing the right information or getting the right information to the right users, and obviously updating their specific area of the intranet. And you're going to need that commitment from department heads and management, because it's not just a quick update now, but it might change the goals and visions of the organization, or how you actually deliver your products and services, how you market news to your team members or to clients, and how you promote to clients, and how you actually celebrate successes and learn from some of the failures. So it's more than just text, it's more than just an update. It might be images, it might be videos, but it is really important to maintain that transparency. Those collaboration team workspaces are obviously really powerful as well, and that will also help facilitate that cross-functional relationships and information sharing across the organization. So think about setting up workspaces for teams, locations, projects, new system support, and having that central area where everyone can jump in and they can learn. It's also really important to have that collaborative space where you can access documents, post social updates, for example, or link to other resources and tools, or even display team or company-wide calendars. And as a real practical example, if you're dealing with a crisis or a whole new world of everyone suddenly working from home, it's a great way to set up a dedicated team workspace with up-to-date information, news, policies, procedures to make sure everyone's getting access to the information they need really easily. If you extend that a little bit more to social communities and really encourage staff to virtually connect outside the office environment, you can look at scheduling virtual get-togethers, share tips and tricks and best practices of what works for everyone, because everyone's going to have their own new routine. Ask questions and get advice, and obviously link to relevant resources that everyone might be finding. And really important, again, as mentioned before, is making sure that you can get an update and subscribe to any alerts. Before we do wrap up and jump into a Q&A and answer questions, because I can see there's lots of questions coming through. So before we do jump into questions, I thought I'd just mention a quick case study over here, which is Northcott. So they're one of Australia's leading not-for-profit disability service organisations with 2,500 staff across 160 locations. And they're a really organisation because they update content once, they upload it once, and then they tag it using taxonomy and metadata so that it can be dynamically displayed for different users in the organization, depending on the user that's logged in, permissions, location, the type of user they are. So for example, version control around policies and procedures and documents is very strictly managed and maintained, but it's all in one specific place and location. A few interesting things they've done. So they have a process which is called Supported Independent Living, SIL. It's a form and workflow process, which typically would take quite a lot of time to create and manage and go through a lot of paper. They automated that with forms and workflow with the LCOM platform, so that if users are requesting funds from NDIS, it's a very quick and easy process. They also have an early childhood, early intervention workspace, and that helps to give that specific team information that's relevant to them, that's personalized to them, and actually helps them make their life a lot easier in terms of communicating to their members. And another point that's really vital to NULA, which is Northcott's Internet and Digital Workplace powered by LCOM, is that they've got people that are working in the head office and could be working, remotely, obviously, or on the road. But there's a lot of support that's provided where you can't work from home. You're working actually one-on-one with a specific client of theirs, someone that needs the services. And so they've made sure that everything is completely accessible on a mobile and a tablet device. And you'll have a look at the mobile responsive view over there, where you can quickly jump in, access the news, and also search for specific people. So I think that's really important in terms of how they've actually designed their digital workplace and their internet powered by LCOM. So just to summarize some of the key takeaways from today, because we realize everyone's in this new world, a lot of people are working remotely where they haven't previously worked remotely, and they're currently working from home. And so what are some of the key takeaways that you can use today? So first is create a central hub of resources. Make sure that becomes your single source of truth so that you can actually maintain that one accurate, up-to-date version of information. And it essentially becomes integrated to your digital ecosystem, but it becomes the front door of the organization. It becomes the front door of your digital workplace where everyone goes every day, all day, every day to access information they need to get the most up-to-date information on what's going on in the organization. Use a phased approach, and I think that's really important. Look at the must-have versus should-have versus nice-to-have. As mentioned, you're going to get a really long shopping list and a really long wish list. So think about those and prioritize those. That's really the key thing there, is really prioritize what you can do right now and what you may need to phase in different future phases. And focus on maintaining staff access to current resources and communication. If you can't easily access the resources, the communication, the information from outside the office, look at how you can deploy your intranet nice and easily that's going to access just the stuff that people might need in the next unknown period of time. If it's too difficult for you to make your internal systems externally available, you may have a bunch of hoops you need to jump through or policies and procedures that prevent that. So do think about then how you can spin up the internet really quickly and easily to enable them to access the information they need remotely. And keep improving and refining that. It's never finished. It's never launched completely. There's always going to be work you're going to be enhancing. So just keep that in the back of your mind. And the final big takeaway there or point is make sure you address the needs of remote employees. And so think about everyone, how they're doing, get that feedback, look at those regular anonymous surveys or one-to-one meetings, whether it's video conference or it's a phone call or whatever it might be. Communicate regularly to everybody, set the right expectations, encourage engagement, and put those different tools. We went through a whole range of those different tools, forms and workflows and team workspace and collaboration and personalized updates and news and social collaboration. And so it's really important to encourage that engagement and encourage the use of those tools from the top, top down and bottom up as well. It's really important that every level of the organization is encouraging that, supporting each other. A lot of people are doing it for the first time and they're navigating it. So it's really important to be positive about that, encourage everybody and know that everyone's learning day by day. So we're about to jump into the Q&A. Just a quick introduction to Elcom for those that have joined us that may not be familiar with who we are and what we do. So we're Elcom. We're a leading digital workplace platform, and we've been working with organizations for decades, helping them deliver personalized and engaging employee experiences, digital workplaces, and intranet. The Elcom digital workplace platform is really easy to use. It's mobile friendly. It's got over 100 modules of functionality and out of the box functionality such as forms and workflows, digital workplaces. It's got everything from user account membership management, event management, calendars, personalized information, depends on teams, departments, locations. So it's all out of the box functionality in the Elcom platform. It's secure, it's scalable, and it can be deployed for a whole range of different scenarios depending on where your organization is in their journey and how they're supporting their remote workforces right now. So if you do have questions about the Elcom digital workplace platform, please get in touch. We'd love to have a conversation with you, understand what you're trying to do right now and some of the quick challenges you're trying to solve, but also understand the long-term plan and how we can be your partner and support you while you deliver and support your remote working team members and employees. So please get in touch if you want to learn more about the Elcom digital workplace platform. So the first question that's come through is, should your digital workplace be accessed on mobile devices? So that's a really, really good and interesting question. I think it's going to depend between organizations. Obviously, the trend is there. It makes a lot of sense. So, as a general rule of thumb, I'd say, yes, definitely you need to access your digital workplace or internet on a mobile or a tablet device. It obviously depends on your organization's policies, procedures. You might have certain security rules that do not allow that. But as a general rule of thumb, yes, it definitely makes sense to do that. Another question over there. How quickly can you deploy an intranet if you can't access your internal systems? So yeah, I did mention that earlier, and that's a good question and really interesting. Out of the box intranets, like the Elcom platform, can be deployed really quickly and easily. A lot of it's going to come down to what you need users to get access to and how much information or little information you want them to access. But it is something that can be deployed really, really easily. Another question over here. Can this become your knowledge base? Yeah, so that's a good question. I'm assuming you're referring to the Internet of Digital Workplace there. So the answer to that question is yes, this definitely can become your knowledge base. And typically we see the trend where, yeah, your intranet is your knowledge base. It becomes that central place to go and access information, especially as everyone is working remotely. It's really important you've got that one place to go where you can get news, policies, procedures, complete online forms, search the staff directory, the who's who and the zoo, and obviously access any other knowledge and information you need. So it does make sense for it to be your knowledge base. It doesn't have to be, but from a user experience perspective and an employee engagement perspective, it obviously makes a lot more sense. Another question here is, do you recommend that social tools are part of the intranet or they're a separate tool? So again, that's going to depend on the organization. Probably the answer is very similar to the previous one, which is you want to drive everyone to that one digital destination, that digital workplace, that front door to the organization, so that they don't have to worry about trying to access 3 or 4 or 5 different systems to get access to information. So I really do believe it is in your best interest, and it makes the most sense for it to be part of your intranet, and it's all part of the same solution, and it's tightly integrated, as opposed to something separate, because then you're going to get disconnected information. You're going to get some updates in the separate social tool versus the intranet. And again, you're going to have this really disconnected employee experience and disconnected system. So yeah, it really does make sense to have that all in one place. Another question here, not all our users have Active Directory accounts. How can we get information to them? So that's a really interesting one. So a lot of organizations do have workforces where not everyone has an Active Directory account or a company email for that matter. And so they don't have access to some of your typical systems they'd be accessing, but now you need them to be able to get access to information and communications. So that's a really interesting question there. So I'll answer that from Elcom's perspective, from how we see it. With the Elcom platform, we actually support pulling user details in and integrating with Active Directory or company emails, but you can also support private personal emails. So if a user doesn't have an Active Directory account or they don't have a company email, it's very easy for you to then enable them to get access to Elcom as your digital workplace or internet solution, so that you can get them the right information that's personalized, relevant to who they are. You can also respect security permissions for those users. So yeah, it's a really, really good question to think about over there. And it's definitely something that I think you should think about, not exclude users because they don't have company emails or login, but definitely work out how you can bring them as part of your employee engagement, especially if they're now working remotely, but they never previously had. Last question I'll probably answer is, how easy is it to automate forms and workflow? So that's a really good question. We actually did a webinar on that last week around automating manual business processes and driving, business process efficiency and automation of forms and workflow. So definitely check out that webinar last week, because it's a really interesting topic and something we love doing and get really excited about. But the quick answer to that is, it should be really easy to do. Forms and workflows should be point and click. They shouldn't need to be developed and customized. They should also be something that, again, is part of your intranet. It's part of your digital workplace where users can jump in and they can go complete that form with the workflow process and the appropriate notifications, all as part of your digital workplace, all as part of your intranet. So it's all out of the box inside the Elcom platform, really easy for you to set up and configure. And yeah, really, I think it makes sense for it all to be part of the same place, just to improve that employee experience and help drive that engagement. So yeah, I think that's a really important point to raise over there, but definitely keep it as part of the same solution. If anyone has any other questions, please feel free to get in touch with us. My contact details are on the screen over there, or you can check us out as elcom.com.au, elcom.com.au. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. It's been fantastic to discuss how to efficiently and effectively support a remote workforce. It's a really interesting space. It's changing rapidly, so please get in touch. We'd love to help you, partner with you, and help your organization as you efficiently and effectively support a remote workforce. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today, and we look forward to partnering with you and working with you soon. Have a great day. Thank you.